This story is about a king who was much loved and known for his good nature. But one day he was feeling very, very sad, and he went to dinner. And because he was so sad, everybody around him got sad as well. And one of his ministers turned to him and he said, "Sire, you should not be sad. You should be happy no matter what grieves you." And the king looked at this minister and he thought, well, that's easy for him to say. He doesn't have the weight of a kingdom on his shoulders. I wonder if he was sad, would he be able to practice what he preached? And the king decided to put him to the test. So later that night, he called the minister to his chamber, and he took out a huge, glimmering, shining red ruby, and he handed it to the minister. "You look after this ruby," he said. "Pain of death if it goes missing." And the minister took the ruby and he went back to his house and he gave it to his wife, who put it with all her jewellery locked away safe and sound. Now, unbeknownst to the minister, the king had sent spies to follow him, to watch where he put the ruby. And when the minister was away, the spies snuck in and stole that ruby and took it back to the king. "Ah," said the king, and he took the ruby and he threw it into the great big river by his kingdom. So the king called the minister to his chamber. "Minister," he said, "do you have my ruby?" And the minister went home to fetch it, but he couldn't find it. And he searched and searched, but still he could not find it. So he went to the king and he said, "King, please, sire, give me 3 days' grace." "Very well," said the king. "You have 3 days, but if you do not return my ruby, I will kill you, and I will kill everyone dear to you." So the minister went home and he searched and searched through everything he could think of, and he got his wife to search too. But after hours of searching, they could not find the ruby, and he realized it was lost. He sat down with his wife, who was the only person dear to him in the world, and they realized that they were as good as dead. And they realized to themselves that they only had 3 days left. "Well," said the minister, "let's make these 3 days the best 3 days of all our lives." So he called in musicians and he phoned up all his friends and they had a huge party. And anyone who came to his house was given money or gifts. And he had a neighbour, a lady, and she heard about this and she went over to investigate, and she took with her some flowers, and she gave the minister flowers and he gave her a huge pot of gold. She was delighted, of course, and she went home and she told her neighbour, and she said to her, "He's gone mad. If you give him any gift, he will give you gold." And her neighbour looked around her, but she didn't have any flowers, and she didn't have anything she thought was worthwhile to give the minister. Her husband was a fisherman, but her husband hadn't caught anything worthwhile. They were all tiny, puny little fish. So she decided not to go. The second day of the partying was still going on, and the lady's husband came home with a huge, big fish, bigger than any he had caught before. But she wouldn't let him eat it. She took it off him straight away, put it in a basket and took it to the minister's house, and he gave her a pot of gold, and she went home very happy. And on the 3rd day the minister was still partying, and he turned to his wife and he said, "Wife, let's have my favourite meal. Let's have a fish curry." And the wife took the fish into the kitchen and she began to cut, bang. She cut into something solid and she pulled away the fish flesh and the bones and the guts, and out came a very disgusting looking stone. And when she washed it, it shimmered and shone. It was a beautiful red ruby. She gave it to the minister, who took it straight to the king, and the king was delighted. How on earth did you do such a thing?" he said. And so the minister told him that he decided he was as good as dead. So he had a party and someone brought a fish, and in that fish was the ruby, and the king had to admit that he had taken the ruby and thrown it in the river. And he turned to the minister and he said, you practiced what you preached. You managed to stay happy when you had grief on your shoulders, and therefore you will be honoured in this kingdom above all others. You will be my chief minister." And so from that day on, the king always listened to anything that minister had to say, and they all lived as people do in such stories, happily and joyously ever after.